here. All right, the anti-ice rally. This is supposed to be either good or bad. We'll see how Andrew at Channel 5 does it.
My family's from Mexico. I was born in Compton. I'm all for La Raza of Mexico. I would love to live in Mexico, but this is Mexico, so.
We built America. A lot of our farm workers are immigrants.
See, you guys are for.
He said, you guys are foreigners. My brother. What about the Spanish conquistadors? Like names Cordova, Cortez, you know. But okay.
Foreigners, you actually don't know how it is to have a taco de frijoles in the house.
What does that mean?
Nopales, mole,
Yeah, that's cactuses and mole, which is some sauce they make.
queso,
Cheese.
right?
Yeah.
You don't know.
What? Bro, I go to Del Taco and pick that stuff up. What does this have to do with anything? What?
You don't know that richness. You're like a foreigner, right? Are you? What ethnic are you?
White.
Oh, you are. Okay.
What are you?
Caucasian.
You're Caucasian?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because what's funny is because if he doesn't give them a country, they don't know what to respond. Yeah. He can't say, like, I'm Germanic or whatever, etc. He's just like, I'm Caucasian. They're like, oh, cool.
Even you, man, you know, being like, you're light-skinned, you know, nothing racial or nothing, man, but we're all from where we're from, man.
I'm Mexicano.
Okay.
Yeah. People of the sun. See the people of the sun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have
You
any.
actually came and invade our, not you, but your ancestors.
Not really. Texas was its own independent state. And after they split apart from Mexico because they did not like the Spanish rule. And then after that, they became part of them. But I mean, it is what it is, right?
The Europeans.
Yeah, true.
Well, I don't know if the Irish did that, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
See, you're just blaming anybody.
But this is a continuous conversation.
Yeah.
And the important thing is when you have a conversation like this, it's a debate. It's agree to disagree.
Chinga la migra.
Hey.
Donald Trump es un pendejo. You guys might hear these phrases once a month or maybe once a year, but here in Boyle Heights, you hear that shit every day. I'm right here at Mariachi Plaza in the historic barrio of Boyle Heights to do
Boyle
a couple
Heights, baby.
interviews. With who, you might ask? The organizers of a big-ass rally to protest mass deportation, ICE raids, Trump's new executive orders, and so forth. We're gonna go talk to la gente that organized
MAGA Mexicans ain't going anywhere.
this
That's what it
event and figure out ¿qué onda? ¿Qué pasa? What the heck is going on?
ICE is terrorizing our communities, and they're trying to manufacture consent for a war with Mexico.
And these raids are not hyper-targeting criminals. They're hyper-targeting tax-paying community.
So did you see her shirt? Party for Socialism and Liberation. Socialism. There
Raids
it is.
are not hyper-targeting criminals. They're hyper-targeting tax-paying community members. And right
What do you mean? What about those rapists? The dude that had 17 felonies.
now, with all the people not working because they're scared to get deported,
There's a lot of people that don't want to come out. They're scared to come out. They're scared to die out here. They're scared to get taken from these streets. Some of us are
Why are they going to die on these streets? What's going on?
never going to get taken from here, so we're willing to die for those voices that are lost. We're here to speak and do for those that can't.
He's just trying to get through. That's hilarious. Did you see that guy?
Willing to die for those.
He's just trying to walk through, but they're blocking the street. This is probably a sanctioned protest, but I don't know.
Voices that are lost. We're here to speak and
No, this doesn't make it seem like it's sanctioned, though. He's like, bro, I just need to get through.
do for those that can't. My name's not C backwards I can, and I do for those that can't. I can, so I will. And that's for everybody. If you can, do for those that can't.
Trump has confirmed he
What?
plans to address illegal immigration in the U.S. through a mass deportation program.
the stories of families being ripped apart, there's mothers that are being taken away from their children.
Sometimes
Yeah. Yeah, that happens here every day when someone gets taken to jail or prison. Oh, were they talking about the deportation thing? Oh, yeah, no, that too. Oh, yeah, no, but I mean, families are dispersed here in America every day. People make dumb choices. People get locked up. Yeah, no, parents get split up. Child protective services exist here. Parents can literally lose their children. So that happens on a daily basis. But, Yeah, true. Yeah, the migration thing. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be careful just going to the street and getting ice cream.
This past week, a video went viral of a
Maybe in
woman
Cali.
in El Monte who was violently arrested and detained by ICE in broad
Where was the violence?
daylight. Her daughter has cancer and she's undergoing chemo right now.
Mother.
Okay. That sucks. No, that really does suck. That really does suck, but that doesn't affect, the actual points of the matter where they're here illegally. The problem is that I've known a lot of people who have been here illegally for decades and decades. They could have got their paperwork in order, but they chose not to. So I have a lot less empathy for people, So I guess that's where that's at.
Does not have a criminal background, and she's the primary caretaker for her daughter.
She's currently going through chemo right now, unable to walk, and she feels afraid and alone.
They're being ripped apart from the rest of their family and their communities.
We're being told rhetoric that the idea is going to be that we'll create more jobs for Americans if we take away the jobs of immigrants. But these jobs are open to Americans. The immigrants are often the people that are taking low-paying jobs.
Yeah, that's exactly the issue. You're so right. I'm glad she pinpointed this out. The issue is that the immigrants are taking these jobs at lower wages and can be abused more due to the fact of their legal status. So that makes the competitive field of getting a job a lot tougher in some aspects,
Jobs that are being exploited for things that Americans don't.
Very true. Very true. We should address these problems instead of try to import a second-class citizen, to take care of our farms and places we don't want to work,
Want to do. And the issue of job availability is not due to the immigrant community.
Many of these migrant workers come to the U.S. on temporary work visas. She has picked tomatoes in the summer, getting paid for each bucket she picks, at times only making $200 a week.
Americans are.
See? You should be getting paid more for that. Now, is that going to increase price of produce all around? Yeah. But the whole system was built on having a second class of citizen to do these jobs.
Being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken.
It's ironic that this billionaire agenda is wanting to deport immigrants when they're part of the reason for their success, the exploitation of the working class, especially immigrants.
An estimated 11 million people live in the U.S. illegally, at constant risk of deportation, even while large parts of the economy depend on their low-paid labor.
Right, so for as long as I can remember, immigrant labor has seen as quote-unquote unskilled labor, which doesn't exist, right? All labor is skilled. And because of that notion, right, that the people picking our fruit, the folks cleaning up our hotel room, the people literally cleaning up debris, are immigrant workers, there's this notion that their labor is unskilled, therefore should be underpaid.
And you know who's...
It's not that. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with their legal status. They can take advantage of them.
Being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country.
Yeah, they should definitely find a lot of these people who are hiring illegal immigrants and fine them. Get their asses.
Black population and the Hispanic population.
It's easy to criminalize people without taking responsibility for why we have immigration and immigrants in the first place, which is due to U.S. intervention and us intervening in the global south and forcing people to leave. People don't choose to come here lightly. They are forced to.
This country has fucked up the rest of the world. And
now this guy is for communism. So we get some of these. There you go. He posted it. Communist protest, mass deportation. The Communist Party doesn't care about deportation. They're using this as a bait tool to bring people to their Communist Party. I mean,
destroyed
we saw
people's homelands and forced millions of people from the Congo to Latin America to flee their homelands and seek refuge in places like the U.S. And then they turn around and call them criminals and demonize immigrants.
We not cross the border crossed us. They stole Mexican territory. It's us territory. But Trump is crazy.
Damn, so you were alive when Mexican territory was still there? So this is the guy who they're referring to in the Social Security documents who's over 200 years old. Yeah, this is the dude right here. Damn, he looks good, though. Looks good for 200.
Yeah.
Crazy motherfucker, though.
Even right now in Mexico, I think by labeling cartels a terrorist organization, Trump is trying to manufacture consent for a war with Mexico. And that's what they've done across Latin America.
2 weeks ago, I officially designated this gang, along with MS-13 and the bloodthirsty Mexican drug cartels, as foreign terrorist organizations.
La Familia Michoacana has terrorized areas outside of Mexico City for decades.
How do you feel about the designation of cartels as terrorist organizations?
I would say that when it comes to cartels, even that alone and those questions, it's shifting the narrative to that the immigrant community that are coming to the United States are all cartel-based or are all dangerous.
Well, I'm not talking about migrants doing crime. I'm talking about criminal organizations taking advantage of the smuggling routes into the U.S., not the migrants themselves. A lot of them are taking advantage of migrants who are passing through Mexico.
The criminals stamped their skin to signal they had paid. The kids were marked too.
And as they wait, many are being kidnapped by smugglers connected to criminal organizations and held in stash houses, where they are tortured until a family member in the U.S. or back in their home country pays a ransom fee for their release.
Do you feel like that's the responsibility of the Mexican government to root out that corruption in some of the border states, or should it be something that America does?
She's going to blame America.
I think that when we're fighting for improved immigration reform and to create
nothing to do with
paths
immigration.
to citizenship, that the discussion has to be separate from identifying the solutions to manage the infiltration of crime within our country.
The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, has done a really good job by debunking a lot of the rumors.
No, she hasn't. No, she hasn't. They just found that giant fucking kill camp. It literally has a fucking crematorium, a runway, and places to bury bodies. They literally would come in. They found hundreds and hundreds of articles of clothing and shoes, and it had been in the area for years. And apparently people knew about it. And now, no word from the Mexican government. But all right.
Of the cartels and the criminal organizations.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum responded firmly, stating that Mexico would never accept any interventionist actions, emphasizing collaboration without subordination.
They're bought out by the cartels, man. So they won't accept any help from America to fight the cartels, and they'll deem it as basically an act of invasion.
247 homicide victims in the first 2 weeks of Sheinbaum's administration.
It's a narrative, right? It's a narrative that paints immigrants as criminals. And that's what the Trump administration is going to continue doing.
Because it helps make the community afraid, make working class people afraid, so that there's an easier transfer of wealth to the billionaire class. Because the reality is that America, we are the consumers. So anything that comes here, whether it's guns, drugs, we are essentially allowing them and making it a demand.
It's not the people of Mexico who are using fentanyl or at higher degrees, right? It's not the people of Mexico.
No, it's because they're prohibited from doing it. Yeah, the cartel members prohibit their own people from doing it with force of threat because they know how bad it is.
Who are consuming these drugs. It's the people in the United States who are the main consumers.
Kids as young as 11 years old recruited by the cartels to smuggle drugs.
Federal agents say that they have freed nearly 100 migrants into Mexico who were being held against their will after a weeks-long human trafficking sting.
Sure, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with them and their violence, but I feel like they are pushed into a corner of survival, and when you're pushed into
they're not. What? They're just taking
survival mode. People do what they have to do to survive.
It's a 40-millimeter grenade launcher.
It's a lack of opportunity that disallows them to get certifications or to get certain education, things of that sort.
And when we talk about violence,
9 bodies hanging from a bridge in Mexico City.
I think it's important to also remember that just because they may inflict physical violence, like the U.S. commits a lot of violence in other ways to us and to other countries, like whether it's denying people health care or you know.
All right, now I'm going to introduce a segment for the first time that's called Theory versus Reality, where we take relatively bad faith statements that are made by passionate Americans and follow them all the way to the source to get the real scoop. Now, what you just heard was the undermining of the very real danger and threat posed by the Mexican drug cartels, and the unfortunate grouping of that assessment as being part and parcel of Trump's anti-migrant sentiment.
It's a narrative, right? It's a narrative that paints immigrants as criminals.
I believe that it's this unnecessary intersectionality imposed by reactionaries of all kinds that most potently obscures issues to the point of shutting down the conversation. Because the underlying message in that is that if you're critical of the actions of the drug cartels, you're playing into the anti-migrant sentiment, which in turn makes you racist. But thankfully, I don't care about that, so I'd like to explain a few things.
Let's go.
The cartels and the migrants are two separate entities.
True.
Migrants come from around the world to find work and safety in the U.S. The cartels are billion-dollar corporations that pump drugs into the U.S.
And
however, 95% of the time, migrants pass through Mexico on the way here, which gave the cartel a huge new business opportunity.
They've actually expanded. They're into kidnapping, extortion, weapons smuggling, and the scariest of all, human smuggling,
which accounts for a bulk of the revenue.
50,000 people times $8,000 a head.
That's big money.
$400 million.
Following the motto, no one crosses without paying, the cartel often stages mass kidnappings of babies from their migrant mothers to demand huge ransoms.
Me llegaron casi a secuestrar a mi hija, pero pues con la bendición de Dios, el Señor, no sé, se le abrió el corazón y me la dio.
According to Ruben Garcia, the director of a shelter called the Annunciation House in El Paso, this often happens even after they've already crossed.
We just received a mom from Guatemala. She came up with her 4-year-old daughter with a smuggler in Juarez. The smuggler sold her to another smuggler, and that smuggler took her 4-year-old daughter and then took mom to where the metal fence is. You'll get your daughter once you're on the other side. Here's a cell phone. It was a way to get a lot more money. When she got to Border Patrol, the Central Processing Center, there they took her to get a medical checkup, and she was able to get one of the officers to listen to her, who then called Homeland Security Investigation. She had a cousin in Florida that had helped her with some of the money. They set up the meeting in Las Cruces, and there they showed up, they made the arrest, they had the 4-year-old. They also had a 6-week-old baby.
You know, people do what they have to do to survive, and
we need to look at our role.
No.
Additionally, Americans are not solely to blame for the mass flooding of our streets with fentanyl. It's fair to say that American pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharma, which is founded by the Sackler family, are responsible for helping to create a generation of
Andrew's on
Percocet
point.
addicts who later would create a demand for cheap synthetic opiates that was met by the cartel. But in 2023, the Sinaloa cartel, a corporation, did work directly with Hanhong Pharmaceutical Technology, a Chinese research corporation, to create, or invent rather, a powerful line of mass-produced fentanyl pills called Blues. Here was the scene on the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2023, months after the Blues hit.
Overnight, it seemed like the Blues came in, and I just started to see everybody that I knew that was getting high on just the heroin, go to the pills, like their whole lifestyle changed.
10 years ago, the flavor of the month was heroin, right? Right now, that's all shifted into fentanyl. You know, the junkie's dream. Give me the strongest stuff possible, take me to the edge of death.
The fentanyl is just really fucked people up, you know what I mean? It's taken a lot of people's lives. I mean, it's almost taken my life a few times, you know what I mean?
The synthetic market is getting bigger, and it's not gonna stop. They have figured out, hey, if we can manufacture fentanyl in these little pills and sell it for $2 a hit, what else can we manufacture into a little dose and sell it super cheap?
In that year alone, 2023, 74,900 people died from fentanyl-related overdose deaths by a drug that was maliciously packaged, marketed, invented, and imported by the cartels. I think that terrorism in general is a strange label to slap on a group whose primary goal is to make money, but it's definitely not that far off. And the reason I'm going so in-depth is because when people are discussing an issue that doesn't immediately concern them and their safety, it's easy to pivot the conversation toward meta talking points.
It's like the thing I keep talking about. It's like trying to imagine living without your thumb. You don't know what it's like because you've never not had it. It's really not. It's hard to even imagine. You can try to imagine and pretend, but it's difficult, you know?
causes of addiction, and the implications of U.S. intervention in Latin America. But this issue really matters, especially for the people of Mexico, not Los Angeles, whose lives have been torn apart by cartel violence. Here are some different reactions to Trump's new executive order, this time from Mexicans who are currently living in the epicenter of that kind of cartel violence, the infamous but beautiful border town of Ciudad Juárez.
¿Qué piensas sobre eso?
Creo que está bien la clasificación porque pues son personas que hacen daño y que no se tientan mucho el corazón con algunas personas y estaría bien el título con él.
Conocer la verdad.
You know the
Mataron
truth?
mucha gente,
They will
niños,
kill many
señoritas,
people,
violaban y
rape and
todo.
kill
La
women.
gente todo
The
llorando,
people are
la
always
pobreza.
crying, even the poor.
Usted puede vender taquitos y
If
le
you want to sell
cobraban.
tacos
Si
on the
no
street, they'll
daban
like
la semana el
extort you.
dinero, lo mataban.
If you don't pay weekly
¿Qué es
tax,
eso?
they'll kill you. What's
Ahora
that,
hay pura
man?
droga sintética,
And now they're
hermanas.
importing
¿Por qué
bad
andan
synthetic
tantos jóvenes
drugs?
perdidos?
Why do you think so many
Y
young people are
ustedes como
dying?
cronistas
And you guys as
deben echarle
journalists,
ganas.
put this
No
out there.
oculten nada, se lo
And
digo
don't
con
cut any
respeto.
of this.
¿Y sabe qué?
And you know what?
Le voy a decir una cosa.
I'm going to tell you
Yo le
something.
pido a Dios por ustedes para que
I'm
Dios
going
los
to pray to
proteja.
God that He will protect
Porque
you all.
ustedes andan en el peligro.
Because you guys
En
are in
Juárez
danger.
estuvo los Zetas,
In Juarez, there's the Zeta
los
cartel,
salvatruchas.
MS-13.
Con todo respeto a todos los inmigrantes.
To all the immigrants.
Ahí se quemaron 40,
Behind
aquí
the
bajando
cartel,
40 inmigrantes. ¿Sí
The
supo?
cartel murdered 40 immigrants. Guards walk away as fire traps and kills nearly 40.
Killed in a fire that broke out at a migrant shelter along the southern border in Ciudad Juárez, Mexico.
As a personal eyewitness, the man goes on to suggest that the tragic death of the 40 migrants across the bridge was not due to an act of protest gone wrong, but actually because a group of mostly Venezuelans refused to pay the cartel tax, and that humanitarian groups helped to engineer a cover-up out of fear.
Quedaron callados. ¿Por
And
qué?
you didn't hear that.
Porque no les conviene.
Because the
Fueron
cartels
40
govern.
vidas.
But it
Yo
was
vi,
40
a mí
lives.
nadie me lo
I
contó,
was
yo lo vi.
there.
El
I know
Paso
what I
County
saw.
Judge Ricardo Samaniego saying migrants are desperate and immigration policies need to change.
Yo voy
I
siguiendo
think
Bukele.
I've been following Bukele.
Ese
That
presidente
president
ha hecho
has
muchas
done
cosas
many
en nombre
things
de
in the
Dios.
name of
He said
God.
that his favorite politician.
This old man is so based. And that's what it is, though. When you see and actually experience these troubles, like I have been following Bukele too, bro. I've been on the philosopher king. He's making moves. He wants El Salvador to be a first world country, which is mind-blowing for where it's at, because no nation has achieved it there yet. You know? So I think they're doing great. And if a leader came like that into Mexico and cleaned up the cartels, it would be insane, but it's probably impossible, just like probably here, you know?
Politician was Nayib Bukele, the current president of El Salvador, who created a mega prison called the CCOT, or the Terrorism Confinement Center, to indefinitely detain the members of two gangs, MS-13 and 18th Street. Two gangs that began and continued to exist in the streets of LA, but took hold in El Salvador in the 80s after Reagan's deportations.
Is it possible to get a tattoo like this if you're not a gang member?
No, you gotta kill.
You gotta kill to get those tattoos.
Because 14,000 people are being held in CCOT without trial, Bukele has been under fire for human rights violations.
Yeah.
Many CCOT inmates say they were unfairly targeted and profiled. However, this year, El Salvador is no joke, 20 times safer than it was 5 years ago.
That's
and currently has the
crazy.
lowest crime rate in Latin America, which
It
is something
does.
that many Mexicans admire.
Nayib Bukele incluso
Nayib
está haciendo
Bukele
muchas
is
cosas
doing
buenas en
very
El
good things
Salvador.
in Salvador.
El Salvador ya no es
El
el mismo de
Salvador isn't
antes.
the
El
same
Salvador
as it
está
was.
muy bien
El
ahora.
Salvador is really
Bukele
great.
lo están criticando
Now Bukele's
muchos
being criticized
cronistas
by journalists.
porque hay que
Oh,
que los
because
derechos
they're
humanos.
human
Sí,
rights? Yeah.
Y cuando ellos
And when
andaban
they
matando
killed
a la
all those
gente,
people,
es que por eso le
it's
digo,
ridiculous.
¿Piensas que necesitamos una
Do you
cárcel
think we
para
need a
las
jail for the
bandidas en
criminals in
México
Mexico?
como Bukele?
¿por qué no? Si
Why
esas
not?
personas no tienen
If these
provecho.
people contribute nothing to
Yo he
society.
sabido, yo soy
I've
seguidor
seen all of these
de
special
todos los
reports and
programas
programs
especiales
on YouTube.
que hay en YouTube. Y ahí
And
los
there,
entrevistan.
they get
No, yo maté
interviews.
5,
Oh, I've
6,
killed
7, los
5,
violé
6,
y
7
tantas
people,
cosas.
violated
¿Qué
them.
pasó?
What's
¿A eso
going on?
venimos al mundo? No, eso
See,
no
is
venimos.
that what
By the way,
Mexicans bring
the
to the
interviews
world?
that you just saw are from our upcoming episode, Mass Deportations, our first ever multinational closer look special that
This is
examines
good.
the current
Wow,
situation
Andrew.
from both sides
Dude,
of
you're
the border.
doing great.
Hey chicos, esto es Canal 5 con Josué C. y...
This is Andrew, you're watching Channel 5.
If you want to check out an extended and complete version
Yeah,
of that
Josué is this Mexican reporter.
episode, go to our Patreon,
So good.
www.patreon.com/channel5. Okay, let's head back to the anti-ICE rally in LA.
So do you
man.
feel like the first thing that we should do is kind of make the path to citizenship easier on a large scale?
in a way, yes, I feel that we have to look at who is applying for citizenship, complete thorough background checks, look at what they've been contributing to society, which more than often is just contributing to the commerce in society. And as far as border control and trying to control the infiltration of crime, I don't think that anybody is shutting down that discussion or wants the infiltration
they're
of
brushing
illegal
off.
drugs.
Here's the thing: if there was
here
a
she goes.
safer way, a more humane way,
Oh.
and a way that abided by international human laws for immigrants to
They're
cross,
focusing
for
on her
asylum
hand
seekers to
tattoos.
cross, there would be no need for
I wonder what it says.
immigrants to
Stay. Or does it stay lucky or stay something?
cross, for asylum seekers to cross. There would be no need for the cartel to do that. Right? They are definitely taking advantage of the fact that people have to go through extreme and risky ways of getting here because there is no other way. Right? So if we want to support and protect immigrants right now that are literally stuck at the border, right? Because we've been cutting back our asylum
Yeah, but why are they stuck there? They should have, applied before trying to come here.
system so much. We need to make the process more humane.
Thousands are gathering along the National Mall. They're calling for action from Congress and the White House on immigration reform.
So the last time we had immigration reform policy was under Reagan, and it was a blanket amnesty.
I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and who have lived here, even though sometime back they may have entered illegally.
Reagan granted amnesty to immigrants, right? And what it said is like, okay, if you've been here XYZ this long, here's the process to become a citizen, right? We're gonna grant you amnesty. There hasn't been a policy change like that in the immigration law since then, right? And you mentioned asylum, right? The current asylum process is extremely difficult. And unfortunately for most families,
He's gonna put the flow chart.
that do file their asylum claim, they will be denied. And these are folks who are literally fleeing persecution, fleeing war, fleeing.
Going back to Reagan too, he loved asylum because he had this policy, if you remember, called wet foot, dry foot for Cubans, because obviously our enemies are the communists. So he's like, if you're a Cuban and you want to defect to Florida, if you can get here by any means necessary, the moment that your foot touches sand, you're a U.S. citizen. No paperwork, they just give you a passport, like welcome in. And so it's interesting to see some of these conservative policies now backfiring to where they're claiming it's like a liberal policy.
All right, what's up, Channel 5 watchers? As ICE, a government agency with a long history of controversy, claims to be ramping up their deportation operations, it's easy to see how quickly a climate of both fear and panic or celebration and victory can take over people's minds as politicians and their loyal mainstream news outlets fight for your attention by trying to shape your perception of things based upon salacious and sometimes manufactured narratives. It can be very hard to find the truth. That's why we here at Channel 5 remain committed to our mission of bringing you raw, unfiltered coverage of news events as they unfold on the ground with just enough context to tell you what you need to know. But even for us, it's hard to sift through the media machine's propaganda to find the truth. But you know what helps? A little service we use called Ground News, a dope-ass news aggregate. Ground News shows you, among other things, how different
this seems to be a good
outlets,
news source.
left, right, and center, frame the same topics with their own bullshit spin using the biased distribution tool. I actually use this tool before I go into the field to shape my understanding and lines of questioning. For example, as you can see right here, new immigration enforcement operations being launched in LA is primarily being covered by the center and the left, with absolutely no coverage by the right, while the left simultaneously has no coverage of this recent news story about 2 cartel-linked human smugglers being arrested for trafficking 20,000 people into LA, which is only being covered by the center and the right. They also have a dope-ass tool called Blind Spot that allows you to see stories not being covered by the left or the right, stories you might be missing if you find yourself stuck in that goddamn informational algorithmic echo chamber. Ground News also has a feature that we here at Channel 5 love as an independent media company, the ownership feature, which tracks the ownership associated with certain publications that push certain narratives to uphold a shadowy agenda. Journalism is meant to be a means of holding the powerful accountable, but in most cases, it's a business ran by those same powerful people. But who are they? Thanks to Ground News, that's on full display, which is why I'm stoked to say that right now, by scanning this QR code or using the link below, you can subscribe to Ground News for 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. I really believe in what they're doing over at Ground News, and they're a very gracious company to work with, so supporting them effectively means supporting me, which is sick as hell. All right, guys, back to the streets of LA.
So it's only been very recent, this attack on asylum. As I mentioned, because it's kind of, for the longest was seen as that inalienable human right that we all have globally. Right? So if folks are out there, you know, I think The Donut King, I don't know if you've seen The Donut King, is a really great documentary about in the past, we even supported asylum seekers in creating businesses. We supported them in like relocating, right, and thriving. So there's been instances in the United States where we have supported asylum seekers and where there's, and where it was like, you know, politicians that were supporting and pushing for more asylum systems and processes.
I think one of the problems too is it used to be that if you wanted to seek asylum, you had to wait in Mexico and you'd have an appointment with a U.S. Customs official who would give you an appointment, give you a temporary residence card, and you'd get in. Well, Biden changed it to where if you hopped the border, you would seek out a Border Patrol agent, and then you would be transferred to a shelter and then given an appointment in 4 years. So basically, it's bad for the migrants. It's bad for the government. It's just it's a bad situation. I don't think it has to do with left or right. It's just migrant rights, period.
Yeah, and that's where I agree with you because, like I said, both political parties have used immigrants and migrants as a scapegoat, right? They've used asylum seekers as scapegoats. And they haven't created a process that center humanity. Like when you look at folks seeking asylum, and I think one of the things Trump said his first administration, you know, when he was getting called out on putting kids in cages, one of the things he said was like, well, who built the cages, Joe?
Who built the cages, Joe?
Let's talk about
who built the cages, Joe.
You know, and it was the Biden administration, right?
En el tiempo que está el señor Trump ahorita,
in the time that Trump has been in office, he's deported less people than the previous president. If you compare the number that Biden deported in the same period taken out, Trump has deported menace.
La diferencia es Trump está en las noticias.
The difference is that Trump goes on the news saying
los
angry
migrantes,
stuff.
pero Biden y Obama no dicen nada, pero hacen la misma cosa.
They are two sides of the same coin, that it's the same enemy, and the target is to regress society.
Definitely, like back to a pre-immigration state.
Yes, towards white supremacy.
And I think that's why it's important for anyone who supports immigrants and also immigrants ourselves is that no matter who's in office, we need to continue to fight for our rights. Because we know that no matter who's in office, we're gonna be attacked. And we're gonna be seen as the enemy and be pushed as the enemy.
Channel 5 live worldwide, Hollywood and Vine.
Fuck the authority, Channel 5 News.
Channel 55, we don't fuck with custards. And 5 is the best number.
Hey, what's up, guys? Oh, shit. Hey, man, thanks for that web link. It's really working.
That was another banger by Andrew. No, that was good overall. You know, cartels are not in it for survival. Cartels are not for the immigrants either. Damn, no mama's downplaying cartels as they're forced to survive is such a brain dead take. And it pays me to even know it's coming from a fellow Hispanic.